We have said it, but it takes guts to actually enforce it, and our president has guts.
Some breaking news coming in from Iran. Fresh tensions have erupted near the Strait of Hormuz, according to the Iranian news agency Mehr.
At 6 o'clock local time, the captain of a 330-meter crude carrier ordered engines ahead standard and pushed southeast into the Persian Gulf. Routine departure, the kind logged in 1,000 bridge journals without a second thought. Except the world's most important oil choke point was currently controlled by a country that had just lost a conventional war and decided to win the next one without fighting it. Unknown to the bridge crew, an IRGC monitoring station on Keshem Island had been tracking the vessel since she finished loading. Her exact position, speed, heading, and cargo had been broadcasting automatically to every receiver on the Iranian coast for the past 6 hours. International maritime law required it. She had 90 nautical miles of Iranian coastline between her current position and open water. No weapons aboard, no escort. 6 hours of Iranian geography at 15 knots. And Iran hadn't needed to fire a single round to make every one of those miles the most expensive stretch of ocean on the planet. Here's exactly how that works, and why the weapon Iran actually built has nothing to do with the ones the crew was watching for.
Frontline briefing uncovering modern warfare's hidden battles.
Before you can understand what the Pacific Fortuna was sailing into, you need to understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually looks like on a navigational chart, because the geography alone explains why Iran holds leverage that no other country on Earth could replicate from this position. The strait is 21 miles across at its narrowest point. That sounds like room to maneuver until you realize that commercial traffic doesn't get to use any of it freely. Every vessel transiting in either direction is confined to the traffic separation scheme. 2 lanes, each 2 miles wide, with a 2-mile separation zone between them. Inbound on one side, outbound on the other. The entire usable corridor is barely 6 miles across. Imagine driving a vehicle 3 football fields long through a 2-lane tunnel with no shoulder, no exits, a 15-minute stopping distance, and 300,000 tons of flammable liquid in the trailer. That's a VLCC transit through Hormuz on a routine day. This was not a routine day. Now look at what sits alongside those 6 miles of usable corridor. Iran doesn't guard the entrance to the Persian Gulf. Iran is the entrance. Keshem Island alone stretches 120 kilometers parallel to the narrowest section of the strait. The islands of Larak, Hormuz, and Abu Musa sit directly inside the shipping lanes, each one carrying an IRGC garrison, radar stations, and weapons infrastructure that has been expanding steadily for 2 decades. Both walls of the corridor, the ceiling, the floor, all Iranian territory or Iranian-controlled water. Before the crisis, roughly 15 million barrels of crude moved through this corridor daily, 20% of the world's seaborne oil supply. The number today is 0 if your flag is aligned with the coalition. 47 tankers are sitting at anchor in the Gulf of Oman because their owners ran the numbers and decided that waiting was cheaper than transiting. The Pacific Fortuna's captain had decided differently. He was about to find out exactly what that decision cost. Here's the detail that makes Iran's position in the strait almost insulting in its simplicity. The small antenna on the Pacific Fortuna's mast is her AIS transponder, automatic identification system. Every commercial vessel above a certain tonnage is legally required to keep it transmitting continuously. International maritime law, non-negotiable. The entire point of the system is collision avoidance, keeping 2 streams of enormous vessels moving in opposite directions through a 6-mile corridor from running into each other. Every few seconds, the Pacific Fortuna broadcasts her exact position, speed, heading, and cargo type on a frequency that any receiver in range can pick up without any special equipment. A $200 off-the-shelf receiver captures everything the bridge knows about its own ship and delivers it in real time to anyone within line of sight. Every IRGC monitoring station on the Iranian coast has been reading it since she loaded. The Pacific Fortuna is legally required to announce her own approach to every weapons system pointed at the shipping lane. She's sending a detailed position update to the Iranian Coast Guard every few seconds, without pause, for the entire 90-mile transit. It is, by some margin, the most effective surveillance system Iran operates in the Strait, and it was built, funded, and mandated by the international maritime community, specifically to make commercial shipping safer. Iran contributed nothing to it except a $200 receiver and the patience to listen. The lookout called a dark object first, bearing 010, roughly 400 meters ahead, riding low in the outbound lane. Could be debris off a fishing vessel, could be something that ends the transit before it properly begins. From a bridge 20 meters above the waterline, you cannot tell the difference between floating trash and a contact-influence mine until the distance closes enough to make the question irrelevant. And at 15 knots with a stopping distance measured in kilometers, the question becomes irrelevant long before you can answer it. The captain reached for the helm order and stopped. Here's where the geometry becomes a trap with no exits. The Pacific Fortuna is carrying 300,000 tons of ship and cargo combined. At 15 knots, her stopping distance runs between 4 and 8 kilometers. That's 15 minutes of forward momentum before she comes to rest under emergency braking. Her turning circle spans 4 kilometers, and the lane she's confined to is 2 miles wide. Turning hard enough to avoid something ahead means crossing into oncoming traffic or into Iranian territorial waters. You don't dodge, you hold your heading and accept whatever sits in front of you, because by the time you can see it clearly, you have already arrived. The object slid past 200 meters to starboard. The bridge held its collective breath until it was behind them. What almost certainly just passed the Pacific Fortuna was a Mahan 3, Iran's tethered influence mine, anchored to the seabed on a steel cable and floating at a depth calibrated to catch the hull of a vessel this size. Magnetic and acoustic sensors tuned to the specific rumble and steel signature of a loaded VLCC. A mousetrap on the ocean floor, except the mouse weighs 300,000 tons and has no ability to change direction. The lookout didn't know what it was. He knew it didn't move like floating garbage, and he knew that was enough to watch it very carefully until it was gone. The Pacific Fortuna passed a second dark shape minutes later. The lookout didn't call this one out. He watched it slide past and exhaled quietly. What he wasn't watching for was the one that doesn't float. The Mahan 7 sits directly on the seabed and presents a sonar return indistinguishable from the surrounding seafloor. Dedicated naval minesweepers struggle with it under controlled conditions. A commercial tanker navigating by binoculars and bridge radar has no detection capability against a weapon specifically engineered to look like the bottom of the ocean. Iran's total mine inventory runs somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 units, more than any other country in the region by a significant margin. IRGC small craft and fishing vessels can carry half a dozen mines each and deploy them while operating identically to normal coastal traffic. A fishing boat laying a mine looks exactly like a fishing boat pulling a net. The deployment is invisible inside the commercial activity that fills this corridor every day. Each mine costs Iran between $10,000 and $25,000 to produce. The tanker it's aimed at carries $180 million in crude oil, plus a hull worth tens of millions more. But here's the figure that matters more than the cost of the mine, and more than the cost of the ship it might hit. The mine doesn't need to detonate. Before the crisis, war risk insurance on the Hormuz corridor ran a fraction of a percentage point, a rounding error on the operating cost of a transit. After Iran laid mines in the shipping lanes, Lloyd's of London reassessed the risk environment overnight. War risk premiums tripled within days of the first confirmed contact. On a vessel the size of the Pacific Fortuna, that premium increase translates to several $1 million for a single transit. The mine sitting on the seabed at this moment is performing its primary function without detonating. The insurance market priced in the possibility of detonation and handed Iran an economic instrument that runs continuously at zero operational cost. The real weapon isn't the explosive charge. It's the line item it adds to every shipping company's cost spreadsheet. Every day the mine remains in the water. The bridge radar painted fast-moving contacts at 0814. Small returns converging from the Iranian coast north of Larak Island. 5 contacts becoming 8, 8 becoming 12. All tracking at 40 to 50 knots on a direct intercept course. At the Pacific Fortuna's 15 knots, they would be alongside in under 4 minutes. Visual confirmation came fast. Low hulls running hard with spray breaking off the bows. Iranian naval markings. Weapons mounts visible on the foredeck. 8 boats fanned out in a pattern that surrounded the tanker before the bridge crew had finished counting them. The lead boat crossed the bow at 200 meters, close enough to make out faces. A second ran parallel at 30 meters off the port quarter, crewmen filming on handheld cameras. A third made a high-speed pass down the starboard side and threw a wake that slapped the hull hard enough to feel on the bridge. The second officer grabbed the satellite phone to call the management company in Athens. The bosun started filming from the port wing. The shipping company requires video documentation of every IRGC encounter for the insurance claim that follows. The lookout was quietly counting weapons mounts and doing math about whether international maritime law stops a missile at close range. The bridge radio crackled. Broken English. Marshall Islands vessel. You are entering restricted waters. Alter course for Bandar Abbas immediately. The captain keyed his radio. IRGC vessel. This is Pacific Fortuna, transiting international waters under right of transit passage. Maintaining course and speed. International maritime law sounds authoritative in a briefing room. It sounds considerably smaller when 12 armed boats are circling your ship at 50 knots, and the nearest naval support is 60 miles south. What's actually circling the Pacific Fortuna is worth understanding specifically. The backbone of the IRGC Navy fast attack capability is the PACAP-class missile boat, 17 meters long, 14 tons, armed with NOR anti-ship missiles, capable of 52 knots. At that speed, it covers a nautical mile in 68 seconds. The Pacific Fortuna covers the same distance in 4 minutes. Behind the PACAPs come C-14 catamaran missile boats, carrying C-704 anti-ship missiles. Behind those, Hudong-class boats mounting NOR missiles. Iranian copies of the Chinese C-802 with ranges of 120 to 170 kilometers and 165 kilogram warheads. Behind those, hundreds of smaller armed speedboats carrying machine guns, RPG, and in some configurations, explosive payloads for ramming. The Pacific Fortuna's defensive inventory at this moment consists of a VHF radio, 3 camera phones, and a strongly worded position statement under international maritime law. What the bridge crew doesn't know, and what the IRGC commander on the lead boat absolutely does, is that the Pentagon already learned what this exact swarming doctrine produces in the Persian Gulf, and the lesson came with a $250 million price tag. Millennium Challenge 2002, the most expensive war game in American military history. A retired Marine 3-star general named Paul Van Riper commanded the Iranian analog force. He sent coordinated waves of fast boats combined with shore-based missile fires and explosive-laden ramming craft through a simulated Gulf engagement against a U.S. carrier strike group. Van Riper sank 16 warships in under 10 minutes, including the carrier. The Pentagon reset the simulation and scripted a predetermined American victory. Van Riper walked out of the exercise and told reporters that a military culture unwilling to honestly test itself against an adversary's actual doctrine was not well positioned to face that doctrine in combat. The IRGC was paying attention to those results even when Washington wasn't. They have been drilling these exact tactics in these exact waters for more than 2 decades. The boats have only gotten faster. The IRGC commander on the lead boat checked his orders. Intimidate, document, report, do not fire. The boats held formation for 6 minutes, then peeled off toward the coast. The bridge crew exhaled. The captain didn't. Qeshm Island fills the northern horizon, 120 kilometers of Iranian territory running parallel to the shipping lane, close enough to make out buildings on the shore, communications towers, vehicles on the coastal road, and structures carved into the cliffside that don't resemble houses because they aren't. The chart shows 22 nautical miles remaining to the exit point, 90 minutes of Iranian cliffside at current speed. The Pacific Fortuna passes a stretch of coastline where satellite imagery from the previous week showed launcher tracks in the coastal dirt, truck tracks leading out of hardened tunnel positions, up to clifftop firing positions, and back underground. The same pattern repeated at multiple points along the ridgeline. What those trucks carry is the threat no one on the bridge can see arriving or do anything about once it launches: the Noor anti-ship missile. The same weapon mounted on the fast boats that peeled off an hour ago doesn't need to be anywhere near the shipping lane to engage a target in it. From a coastal battery hidden in those cliffsides, it flies at Mach 0.9 and drops to 5 to 7 meters above the waterline in its terminal phase. That's roughly the height of a basketball hoop above the wave surface. It navigates the first 100 kilometers on inertial guidance. No radar emission, nothing to detect, nothing to jam. In the terminal phase, it activates its own active radar seeker, locks onto the steel return of a ship this size, and arrives before the ship's radar has finished processing the contact. Think of it as a torpedo with wings that approaches below most radar horizons, announces itself only in the final seconds of flight, and carries 165 kilograms of high explosive into a hull carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil. Range on upgraded variants runs to 170 kilometers, which means a battery positioned anywhere on Qeshm Island can engage any vessel in the outbound shipping lane without moving from its cave. The Noor's larger sibling is the Qadir, range extended to 200 to 300 kilometers, enough to cover the entire width of the strait from a single fixed battery. Same warhead class, same terminal profile, same mobile launchers that drive back into hardened tunnels before any ISR asset can trace the firing position. The entire 120-kilometer coastline is a loaded weapons system pointed at a 2-mile wide lane. The crew on the bridge can see the coast clearly enough to make out vehicles. They cannot see a single launcher, and what sits on mobile platforms farther inland changes the threat geometry entirely. The Khalij Fars, Persian Gulf in Farsi, is Iran's anti-ship ballistic missile, built on the Fateh 110 airframe. Where the Noor hugs the wave surface at basketball hoop height, the Khalij Fars does the opposite. It climbs on a solid rocket motor, arcs to high altitude, and dives into the target from near vertical at between Mach 3 and Mach 5. The warhead weighs 650 kilograms. An electro-optical seeker guides it onto moving ships during the final seconds of descent. The Noor gives a ship's crew approximately 30 seconds of warning from first radar detection. The Khalij Fars arrives from directly above at 5 times the speed of sound. Warning time is measured in seconds, less time than it takes to finish reading this sentence. No commercial vessel on Earth carries a defense against either system. A hit on a loaded VLCC probably wouldn't sink it immediately. They're enormous and heavily compartmentalized, but it doesn't need to. A warhead detonating inside a hull carrying 2 million barrels of crude produces a fire. A burning supertanker in a 2-mile wide shipping lane is a physical obstruction until someone figures out how to move 300,000 tons of flaming wreckage out of the only usable corridor. Nobody has a plan for that. Nobody wants to find out if their plan would work. The lookout called a new contact at 9:20. Airborne, small, slow, circling at approximately 5,000 feet. Not closing, not attacking, circling. The drone orbiting the Pacific Fortuna is an Iranian Mohajer reconnaissance platform, the persistent surveillance asset that has been the targeting eye for every IRGC interdiction operation against commercial shipping since the crisis began. It feeds position, speed, heading, and course changes in real time to every missile battery and boat commander within its data link range. Its direct operational cousin is the Shahed 136, a one-way attack drone, essentially a flying warhead with 2,500 kilometers of range that costs approximately $20,000 per airframe. In 2019, a coordinated Shahed strike neutralized roughly half of Saudi Arabia's total oil production output in a single attack. The weapons that achieved that result cost less in aggregate than a new luxury sedan. A $20,000 drone against $180 million in crude oil and a global energy market that moved on the news within hours. That cost-exchange ratio is the foundation Iran's entire strait strategy was built on. And the Mohajer circling at 5,000 feet is proof of concept still actively operating. The drone banked north into the coastal haze after 2 more orbits, not attacking, cataloging. Somewhere on Keshem Island, a coastal battery just received an updated position fix on the Pacific Fortuna. The weapons are loaded. The crew is ready. Iran is waiting to see whether using them is necessary.